May is Suicide Prevention Month, so please remember that you're not alone. Call or text 988 if you or someone you know needs help. The Mix and Match podcast receives funding from the Abandoned Albums Patreon community. If you'd like to become a member and support what we do here and other independent creators, please visit patreon.com/abandonedalbums.
Welcome to the Mix and Match podcast, the place where we bring together the art inspired by the music and the music inspired by the art. We'll introduce you to creators of all kinds who draw inspiration from music. In some cases, there will be writers, and in others, painters, potters, glassblowers, doctors, nurses, mechanics, and maybe even a cobbler or two. In short, there'll be members of our tribe, artisans, creators, and people from all walks of life who connect with music. We asked each guest to create a playlist around any theme they want, which we link to in the show notes. During our conversation, we'll go through each song. Because where there is music, there is inspiration. Welcome to Mix and Match. Thank you for joining us.
What would you say you do here?
Well, Steve, thank you for joining me here.
I'm so happy to be here.
It's always great talking to you.
Yeah, I was just telling my wife, I was like, at this point, I met Keith through writing, I believe on Medium.
Correct.
But we've spoken so many times that I think of you as a friend. So I was suddenly panicked about 10 minutes before this interview because I was like, wait, was I supposed to have prepared something? Because I think in my head, it was like, oh, I'm supposed to call Keith.
No. And, I've never acknowledged this. I've never said this to you, but I'll say it to you here. Thanks to you, you're one of the reasons this podcast is still going. Because in those early days, as you know, it's very easy for a creative project to get derailed and you can get easily dispirited. But you stepped up and said, here, interview these guys. You lined me up with like 4 different people. And I'm like, oh my God, all right, cool. I don't have to really, this is okay. After that first episode, I was like, oh, this sucks. I don't know. How am I going to get anybody else? But thanks to you, you lined up 4 and many since then. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for doing the show. I mean, I really do. I know it's a funny thing I put at the end of all my emails when I connect people, but I really do believe cool people should know each other and people should connect and be connected to work on things together. So when I see somebody doing something interesting, I'm always the first to raise my hand and go, how can I help?
Yeah. And it's so appreciated. Now, for those listening, I should be upfront and honest. I knew S.W. Lauden as a writer long before I knew him as a music guy, because I have an affinity for crime fiction, noir, that sort of stuff. And you've written a bunch of those stories and books.
Yeah. That's kind of what got me back into writing initially, because I had kind of put writing on ice for a long time. In favor of music, and then starting a family and getting a career. And then in 2013, 2014, I was like, wait, I was supposed to write the great American novel. And instead, I wrote a trilogy of books about a punk rock singer who moonlights as a private investigator. His name is Greg Salem. And once I wrote and published that, I kind of got bitten by the bug again. And I really haven't stopped publishing since it first came out in 2015.
And I can speak to those 3 books. They're great books. I've read all 3.
Thank you.
A great example of the genre. And so that's how I met you. And then we connected on Medium through music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think during the pandemic, I decided to give Medium a try. And it was really me. I'd always been very resistant to blogging. I had a lot of friends who were first wave bloggers, like real early guys who
Hmm.
made a living at it and have made a career out of it. And I was really resistant to it for whatever reason. And then I decided, I think in 2020, to start writing on Medium because that seemed to be where people were at the time. And I was really trying to find my voice or sort of my lane. I didn't really know what I wanted to write about. But you know what, Keith? It's funny that I say that because no matter what I write about music.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't help it. Everything I write revolves around music. Oh, like 99% of my fiction revolves around music. The first short story I ever got published right before the Greg Salem books came out was about a band that an indie band that tours through the Midwest, but they're on a killing spree the whole time.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
So it's like, for me to say that, like, I couldn't figure out what to write about, and then it's like, wait, music. I should write about music. It's like, I guess they say write what you know, and I've spent my whole life in and around music, so it only makes sense.
Going back, when did you realize that music was going to be this integral part of your life? Did you have one of those? My mother always told me that I always had to have music on, even as a baby. So it was just part of, I don't know where that comes from or why that is. We're not a musical family in any way, shape, or form, but it's always been such a big part of my life. Was there a defining moment, or was it something similar for you?
You know, my parents liked music, but they didn't play it around the house very much. Where I was really lucky is I have two older brothers that are 8 and 9 years older than me.
Oh,
So
wow.
really functionally, they're kind of cool young uncles.
Yeah.
And so by the time I'm 11 and 12 years old, the middle brother in particular, although both of them did this, but the middle brother in particular starts taking me to shows. So I'm 11 and 12 and I'm seeing Def Leppard on the Pyromania tour. I'm seeing Aerosmith. I'm seeing Dio. I'm seeing REO Speedwagon. So I did all these arena shows and kind of cut my teeth that way as a tween.
Yeah.
And hanging around his friends and kind of seeing what the burnout 70s lifestyle was all about. And so from that moment on, music just kind of became my identity.
Every time I watch Freaks and Geeks, it reminds me of my older brother and me. Like because that was the upbringing. He was the stoner kid, and I was the dweeby little. I hadn't yet discovered that part of it, but music was such a big part of that. And I've always imagined that dynamic as me and my brother. Is it a similar thing for you?
I mean, yeah, to a degree. I was the youngest of three and youngest by a long shot. And my two older brothers got into more than their fair share of trouble along the way. But I was 40 times worse than them by the time I hit my teens. And I got away with it because I was the baby and my parents already had been through two wild children. And, you know, it was just like, here's a pack of cigarettes and $20. Don't die tonight, you know? And, and that was, you know, my parents were wonderful and they did have done so many wonderful things for me, but like they did just get to a point where it was, we can't do this a third time.
It's the best advice. Just don't die.
Yeah. Please come home. But yeah, I was a hellion. You know, in a lot of ways, I took a lot of the wrong lessons from rock and roll young.
Same.
And as a rock drummer, I embraced some really dumb cliches.
Oh, wow. How did you get turned on to drums?
Well, so again, those two older brothers play a really big role in this. I will say I was always attracted to drums when I listened to music. 9, 10, 11 years old, I would pay attention to Charlie Watts when I was listening to the Stones. I would definitely pay attention to Bunny Carlos when I was listening to Cheap Trick. It always just stood out for me for some reason. But my two older brothers were musicians, and they actually played in a Sunset Strip hair metal band called Prodigy when I was in my teens. And so when I was like 14, maybe 15, I got to roadie for them sometimes and witness the Sunset Strip metal scene in LA when it was in its prime. But my middle brother is a shredding lead guitar player, like just shredding heavy metal virtuoso guitar player. My oldest brother was the bass player in that band. And I think part of me just was like, hey, if I play drums, I can play with my older brothers someday.
And did you?
We did. The middle brother and I played in a silly punk band for a little while, but nothing ever very serious. By the time I got serious about it, our musical tastes were very different. And, so I'm like 15 or 16 and I'm wanting to play hardcore punk. That wasn't really their wheelhouse. Yeah. And by then I had found a whole different group of people to kind of experiment with what a garage rock band might be.
What is your musical CV? What is your drumming CV? Where did you start? Well, what do they call them? Your resume. Where did you start? With what band? Because I know all the bands that you've been in, but I don't think I have I don't have a linear idea.
Oh no! I mean, look, I was in all the requisite terrible. We should start a bands, that you start when you're in junior high and high school. I was in a band called Persecuted Youth. Nice. It was a lot of that kind of stuff, just like other kids in my school who shared similar musical tastes. And you just start bands, or you play a backyard party. Maybe you never even make it out of the garage. You definitely probably don't record anything outside of like a boom box, that just sounds all blown out and terrible. And nobody knows how to play their instruments properly. But it was about, I think, 10th or 11th grade in high school, I got moved from my sort of remedial English class to a higher level English class because this teacher saw something in me. Was the first person that said you could be a writer. And I had no interest because I didn't come from a family that thought like that. I wasn't on a college path. But this teacher saw something and moved me up into this class. At the same exact time, this kid who was in the super smart kid class, but was a little bit of a troublemaker, got dropped down one level. And so we got sat next to each other. And that kid's name was Keith Brown. And that was when I met Keith. He had just started playing guitar. And I was still a pretty new drummer. And we hit it off and we liked some of the same bands. And so he invited me over to his house by the beach where he lived with his mom. And the two of us just started jamming. I think I Got You by Split Enz was the first song that we learned together.
Wow.
And then he said, hey, I know this other kid from high school. And these guys ran in like sort of like, I don't mean to put it in like outsider terms, but that's the easiest way for me to put it. They were the Southside Soch, right? Like, they were the rich kids from Manhattan Beach and I was from the other side of the track. So I didn't know a lot of these people. And Keith got this guy, Greg. And then when summer hit, he flew his old family friend, Dan, down from Santa Cruz. Dan lived in Santa Cruz. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I bought him a bass. I'm going to teach him how to play bass this summer. So Dan lived with Keith for the summer so he could play in our punk band. That, by the way, is Dan Kern, who ended up being the lead guitar player in my band Czar a decade later. But I met him as a teenager.
Wow.
And so that was the first serious band, right? And then that band, we made demos and we played backyard parties and garage parties and house parties. We one time like clipped the lock on an outlet in a public park and set up and just played a punk gig in a public park until the cops came. We were those kids. And then the three of them moved to Santa Barbara to go to college. And I had no plans of doing that. But my dad was like, you're either going to community college or you're getting a job and moving out. And I was like, okay, I'll go to community college. So I did a year of that. Those guys called me and they were like, we need a drummer, come to Santa Barbara. And so I moved to Santa Barbara and that kind of connected me to this whole world that, Keith ended up spinning off and starting a band with a bunch of Santa Barbara locals called Popsico. But through Keith's bass player, I joined this band Rydell High. At the time, I was living in Hermosa Beach. I was playing in a hardcore punk band called the Fish Sticks.
Oh,
and it was the Black Flag logo, but it was Fish Sticks.
Oh, God.
Yeah, no. And then I also, at the same time, with some of the same guys, was playing in an instrumental surf punk band called Bookmobile. And I was like the arts editor for the local paper and just living by the beach. And I had no interest in like a record deal or taking it seriously and all that stuff. But then I got a call from Marco, who was Keith's bass player. And he's like, this band needs a drummer in Hollywood. he talked me into trying out. I got the gig. That band changed its name to Rydell High. We got signed to a punk label in Santa Barbara called My Records. That record got picked up by A&M. And so I was with Rydell High for a while. And then I left Rydell High and joined Czar. And then we made 2 records, one for Hollywood and one that was later released for TVT after I left the band. And that takes me to about 2005. And then that's when I kind of, quote unquote, retired from music.
Okay. All right. That's pretty impressive.
I mean, it's all improbable. You know, I mean, in a lot of ways, if I'm being honest, like I drum the way that I drum. Some people think my drumming is great. A lot of people are like, that guy is a really weird drummer. And it makes sense because I'm a really weird guy. So it makes sense that my drumming would be weird too. But I mean, in so many ways, when I was young, like drums were my way to be part of social situations that I didn't believe I belonged in. It was like my entry card. So drumming was a way for me to gain access to the party that I didn't think I deserved to be at when I was younger. And so it opened a lot of doors. I mean, I put out Pop Sicko's record. You and I talked about it for the podcast. I worked with Big Stir Records and Marco, and we put out Pop Sicko's only record from 95 because Keith Brown died in mid 90s. And I did an oral history of the band. And I said in every interview, and I still mean it, meeting Keith Brown completely changed the course of my life. I was headed for a very blue collar, hanging out at the local bar, shooting pool sort of future. Meeting those guys is the reason I went to college. Meeting those guys is the reason that I pursued a music career. And all of the good that has come out of that in my life is from getting sat next to that guy in English class.
It's so weird how little things like that can have such a profound impact. You don't recognize it at the time, certainly.
No, I knew some things were changing because my old friends were like, who are these new guys you're hanging out with? I'm like, they don't try to beat me up. I think it's important, especially now that I'm in my 50s, it's important for me to own that. It's really important for some reason for me to acknowledge the points in my life where I was lucky or was given an opportunity and took it, or got to be in an incredible situation that at the time I didn't recognize it for what it was. But in retrospect, I'm like, wow, what a lucky life I've had, like what a fun series of accidents and happenstance and collisions of personalities and right place, right time. Let me do some cool stuff, and it's not like I'm any kind of household name or anybody's even heard of any of the bands I've been in aside from like 15 people, but it was fun. It's been a fun life. And it's important for me to acknowledge that.
Yeah. On another podcast, the Booked on Rock podcast.
Yeah.
I heard for the first time, and it piqued my interest because we're of the same age, same generation, that you spent time in Prague, Czechoslovakia.
Oh, you listened to that?
I did.
Oh, yeah. After college, I graduated college at the end of 92. So beginning of 93, my buddy Ted and I got Eurail passes and we traveled around Europe for 30 days. There were 30-day passes. So, we were in London and we were in Amsterdam and we were in Denmark and we were in Munich. And then we woke up in Munich one day and we were like, let's just go to the train station and get on the first train. And then we were on an overnight train to Venice and over the Alps, in the middle of the night. And we arrived and it was Carnival and we didn't know, and there was no place to stay and everybody's walking around in crazy outfits. And again, we both had long hair, man. I was living the grunge dream. I had long blonde hair, wearing a flannel and chunky shoes. You know the look.
I do.
And we walked over to this other kid that was like working a information booth who kind of looked like he might relate to us on a rock and roll level. And we're like, we just got here. We had no idea that Carnival was happening. And he's like, all right, my uncle owns a place on the canals. And so he got us a storeroom that he put 2 beds in so we could sleep and enjoy Carnival. Then we both went to Prague, and some of my friends from Santa Barbara who had worked for the school paper had started the first English language paper in Prague. And they had coaxed me to come over based on my journalism degree to write for them. When I arrived, I found out I could not be paid for writing for them. And I only had like $100 in my pocket, which you could stretch in Prague, but it wasn't going to last me 18 months.
Right.
So I ended up writing for a Czech teeny bopper magazine. I would write about music and they would translate my copy into Czech. And I ran a series of bars and nightclubs in Prague. And I did that for about a year and a half before I moved back to America.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's for me, that was kind of the dream, because Czechoslovakia was just coming out of the dark ages, as it were, and it was the place to be, you know?
I needed a job. I couldn't get hired anywhere because I was illegal, right? But there were enough Americans and other foreigners living there, expats living there at the time. And there was a Canadian-owned Mexican restaurant near the river in Prague, but by the bridge, the sort of famous Charles Bridge. And I would go in there every day and go up to the bar and ask the guy, can I have a job? And every day be like, we're not hiring right now. And I'd be, all right, can I have a beer? And, every day it was just the same thing over and over. And finally he got so annoyed with me. He grabbed a matchbook and he wrote something on it. And he goes, take this to this new bar across the river and tell this guy, John Bruce, that I told him he has to hire you. And he was just doing it to get rid of me. And I trucked across the river and I ended up getting hired by this guy, John Bruce, who was at that moment just opening a bar called The Thirsty Dog. And it became the backpacker bar. It became the expat bar. And I bartended there. And when I first started working there, I literally stood at a tap and cranked out beers nonstop because there would be a line down the block for like 10 and 12 hours, just beer after beer after beer after beer, and met all these people and just night after night hearing all these amazing stories. And then like touring bands started hanging out there, and like Nick Cave sat in our room for like 2 days, and he ended up writing a song about our bar called Thirsty Dog. You can actually look it up in his catalog.
Oh, really?
So yeah, it was a crazy experience. It was so much fun. I'm tempted to write about it, but there's a part of me that maybe wants to keep that just for me. That might be the one thing that I don't write about.
That's fair. Is the Thirsty Dog still there?
No. We got shut down. Like there was like a really high-end hotel right across the street, and like nightly drunk people were just flooding out onto the cobblestone streets and just causing so many problems. I mean, like there's some stuff obviously that I'm not proud of that I was part of, but we were pretty obnoxious living in somebody else's country, But all told, it was a really fun experience. And I played music when I was over there. I was in a grunge band called Dope, and we would play in Prague, and we would do a little traveling around the Czech Republic, and so that was a lot of fun as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's kind of cool. That's the dream life. That's what I would dream about as I was working my shitty retail job.
Yeah, it's not something. Again, it's not something that I would have planned for myself. Somebody else urged me to do it. My buddy, Matt Welch, who I ended up playing in a band with years later, but he was one of the guys that founded Prognosis. That was the name of the English language paper, of course.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. How do you keep all the different genres straight in your head? The different genres of music?
I don't. I think there's this idea that because I've written so much about power pop and power pop adjacent genres, that I spend a lot of time worrying about it. And I really don't. It kind of just so happens that a lot of the music I like generally falls in that ballpark. And quite honestly, purism of all forms drives me a little bit crazy. And so I tend to shy away from the power pop conversations these days. But I think that's probably what the few people who associate me with any kind of music would associate me with power pop, because of the books I've been part of and because of my blog and the kinds of bands that I interview for Remember the Lightning. I just like high energy, hooky rock and roll. And that's sort of like the lens that I view everything through. Again, just so happens that the music I like can be described as power pop or indie rock or jangle or pop punk or whatever. But I just like hooky rock and roll.
Tell us a little bit about Remember the Lightning.
Remember the Lightning is a Substack newsletter that I put together starting in January of 23. So it's been about a year and a half now. And that was after I had left Medium. I don't know about you, but Medium got to the point where it felt like a pyramid scheme or like multi-level marketing where every other article was about how to succeed on Medium.
Yep.
Interestingly, I did have one article go viral that I wrote for Medium, and I'm still getting checks for it. And I mean, I wrote this like 2 years ago.
Hey,
it went completely viral. So their business model works. It's sound, but the community just wasn't for me. And so I decided to start Substack because I had seen a few key people go over there, and I wanted to write about music. But what I was mostly interested in was writing about all the bands I grew up listening to or fell in love with, like Big Star and the Buzzcocks and whatever, but through the lens of music in the 2000s. I wanted to connect the dots because what I was seeing in the power pop and indie pop and rock universes that I was traveling in online was there was the old guard, and then there was these younger musicians who were doing this music that was really incredible, that was clearly in some kind of lineage from all the music we liked from the 60s and 70s and 80s, but they didn't have anything to do with each other. And I was like, there should be some sort of family tree or connection. And so that was for better or worse, whether I pulled it off or not, that was my aim, was to take all this really great new indie pop and rock music and connect it to all the older music and kind of highlight the continuum of hooky rock and roll.
All right.
Yeah. So, and then I also publish a semi-annual guitar pop journal, which is also called Remember the Lightning. And the idea there is to allow myself and other music writers to be able to kind of spread their writerly wings a little bit. And so I think of these things as they're print and ebook, but I think of them as like a fanzine meets the power pop essay collections that I've been part of.
Okay.
It's got a little bit of a fanzine spirit. It's a little chapbook, but those essays, and I've gotten some really amazing music writers to contribute to this, which I'm very thankful for. But those essays are all locked in these books because at the end of the day, I'm a book guy. My dream has always been to publish books. And so I have the newsletter. It's free. It's a lot like blogging. I interview bands. I have guest posts, but the books are the things that matter to me the most.
And what about the title, Remember the Lightning?
Well, that's the name of one of the best power pop songs of all time from the band 2020, which was an LA band that was made up or fronted by two guys from Tulsa, Oklahoma, Steve Allen and Ron Flint. And, Tulsa in its own right was a hotbed of like pop rock activity in the late 70s. These guys moved to LA and started 2020. Their most popular or most famous song is called Yellow Pills. Jordan Oakes, who writes for me now, started a very famous power pop fanzine and a series of just legendary power pop compilations called Yellow Pills. So when I started this thing, I decided to choose a different 2020 song name, and I chose Remember the Lightning, sort of in homage to Yellow Pills, also in homage to the band that I love so much. And I reached out to Ron Flint, who wrote the song, and I said, hey, can I use your song title for this? And he was very gracious and said that I could.
Now, you and I interviewed those guys a while back, and they said they had new music coming out.
Yeah.
Did it ever come out?
I don't believe that it did. I think like a lot of other people, it seemed like they got pretty derailed by the pandemic. And so I checked in with Steve Allen maybe 6 months ago, and they said they were still working on it and trying to find a way to put it out and play some shows. And I hope that happens because I never got to see them. So I would love to see them play live.
I want to ask you about your most recent project, Generation Blue. Tell us a little bit about that. What is the story? What's the significance? What's going on with that?
Yeah, that's okay. I'll try to sum it up, but it'll be easier because I already kind of set the stage. So I grew up in LA, going to shows a lot. Like, I think I was 17 and got my first fake ID so I could see a garage punk band play at some small club in Hollywood. So specifically why I got the fake ID. And that kind of set the template for what I used it for mostly. I mean, I used it for a lot of stuff, but I used it to be able to get into clubs, to be able to see the bands I liked. And so I was going to a lot of shows in high school and early on in college and throughout college. And I thought I had a pretty good handle on what was going on in LA. So I graduate college and I moved to Prague. And I saw some incredible shows in Prague. I saw Sugar. I saw Pavement. I saw Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. I saw the Velvet Underground with all 4 original members in Prague. But they were kind of stuck in a time warp a little bit. They were a little behind what was happening in the West. But, backpackers would bring new music through, but like we were relying on all the stuff that we brought when we moved there. So I was like, I had the first 2 Green Day records on cassette, and I was turning everybody on to Green Day at the time. And, it was that kind of thing. We listened to a lot of Teenage Fan Club. And so I got home and I went to see, a couple of days after I got home, my buddy Keith picked me up and we went to see our friend Mike Randall, who from the band Baby Lemonade, and later they became the band Love that backed Arthur Lee. But Mike was just starting Baby Lemonade at this time. And he and Rusty, the guy who fronts that band, who sings and plays guitar for that band, were working at a record store called Moby Disc. And I walked in there and Mike saw me and he goes, "Oh my God, you got to hear this. You're the first guy I thought of when I heard it." And he had an advanced copy of the Blue album by Weezer. And he was totally right. Like, it floored me. I was like, what happened in LA during the 18 months that I was gone? Because it was exactly that 18 months that Weezer happened.
Wow.
I was like, what happened in LA that bands now sound like this? This is amazing. This is like everything that I like has been leading up to this, right? Pavement, the Pixies, the Beach Boys, and so I fell for Weezer. And then lo and behold, that band Ride El High that I ended up getting in, it took me a minute to put this together, but the lead singer of that band, Kevin Rydell, grew up playing heavy metal with Rivers Cuomo in Connecticut. They moved out here to be part of the Sunset Strip metal scene in '89 with a band called Avant Garde that later changed its name to Zoom. And then broke up in like 90, 91. And then Weezer's together by 92. Right. So there's this huge transformation that happens. And there's all these guys in this universe around Weezer, including Ride El High. There was this band Shufflepuck that was formed by the bass player of Avant Garde and another friend of theirs from Connecticut who flew out, and they started Shufflepuck. And so without my really even realizing it or planning it, I was suddenly in Weezer's orbit. And as they blew up with the Blue album and the Reynolds record came out, this full-blown geek rock scene happened in LA. Like overnight, everybody had cropped hair and soccer jerseys, and we're playing music that, if it wasn't directly inspired or influenced by Weezer, it was taking little bits of it, right? Little bits and pieces of it. The thick guitars, definitely the aesthetic, the band names, a lot of them had ER on the end. But there was this whole scene happening. It was really vibrant. And this is when they were just like giving out record deals like Halloween candy in LA. And so a lot of these bands got signed. I mean, didn't go anywhere, but we got to sign major label record deals and make videos and hear our song on K-Rock and see our video on 120 minutes, twice, not 1,000 times, but twice. And it was this really magical moment in LA. It supported an annual pop rock festival that could do 3 or 4 clubs a night for 6 or 7 nights in 1 week with stacked bills. There was that many pop bands in LA at the time.
Holy cow.
And so I was just part of this magical scene that I left Ride El High and joined Czar. But I saw Weezer in 2019 at a radio festival, and it was just like hit after hit after hit. And I turned to some of my friends and I said, these guys don't get credit for how influential they are. Like, against all odds, Weezer's still making hits 30 years later. And that kind of turned into this idea of writing a book about geek rock. And the more I explored that, I mean, I got offers from publishers, but something felt off about it. And then I kind of asked myself, what did I really want it to be? And what I really wanted it to be was the story of that scene I was part of. I really wanted to tell that story. And so I started contacting all the old band members and club bookers and A&R people, and I created an oral history and a vinyl compilation. The vinyl compilation features 11 bands that are in the oral history that were all part of this geek rock scene that Weezer and the Rentals created.
How did you select the bands for the album?
Well, I mean, part of that's pragmatic. Part of that is wish list, right? They have to have the rights to it. They still have to have the masters, so some of it had to line up in terms of the economics and the legalities and that kind of stuff. But it had to be people that I already interviewed for the book. The book came first. The vinyl compilation really kind of developed over time once I was holding this like sheaf of paper of like the 35 interviews I did. And I was like, this is going to need a soundtrack. So then I went to Big Stir Records and said, hey, would you guys put a record out? I'll print the book. You make the record. We'll put it out as a package. So that's how the whole thing came together. But, I mean, I knew I had to have Nerf Herder on there because they were such a big part of that geek rock scene. I knew I had to have Shuffle Puck. I wanted Baby Lemonade because Mike was the guy that introduced me to Weezer in the first place. Campfire Girls, the drummer of that band, made the Weezer demo that got them signed. So it's like that kind of interconnectivity. Super Sport 2000 never released really. I think they released a 6-song EP. We have a song called Mooks that was never released, and it's definitely their first time on vinyl. Super Sport 2000 became the Rentals.
Okay.
Matt basically adopted this entire band, and they became the Rentals for the Return of the Rentals. So it's like a very interconnected scene of musicians who just kind of enjoyed this sort of magical moment together. And it lasted about 8 or 10 years.
Oh, I didn't even realize it lasted that long.
Yeah, because there were waves, right? There were the bands like Thousand Mona Lisas, Black Market Flowers, Wax, That Dog, Campfire Girls, Super Sport 2000, who kind of came up alongside Weezer and kind of stayed in their universe. And then there was the second wave of bands that kind of followed in their blueprint. And that would be like, Shuffle Puck and my band, Rydell High. And then there was another wave of younger Weezer fans in bands like Ozma, Kara's Flowers, Phantom Planet. They came along and Rooney. And so now because they were younger, that starts to get into the late 90s and early 2000s. And many of those bands ended up touring with Weezer when Weezer came back with the Green Album and kind of kickstarted their career again in the new millennium. So it was just really a sort of a nostalgic look back at this thing that maybe many people didn't know about. But the best description I've heard of the vinyl compilation is it's like nuggets for geek rock fans. If you like Weezer and Reynolds, you're going to like all these songs.
That's appropriate.
Yeah.
That works. Well, that being said, let's jump into your playlist. We start off with Pictures of Lily by The Who.
Yeah.
I used to wake up in the morning. I used to feel so bad. I got so sick of having sleepless nights. I went and told my dad. He said, son, now here's some little something, and stuck them on my wall. And now my nights ain't quite so lonely. In fact, I don't feel bad at all. I don't feel bad at all. Pictures of Lily made my life so wonderful. Pictures of Lily help me sleep at night.
Why are we leading off with The Who?
Well, this kind of, the way I put this list together, and by the way, does everybody complain about only 10 songs? Because I had a really hard time just picking 10 songs.
No, people complain most about not the quantity. It's like, how am I going to get 10 songs? It's like, well, don't overthink it.
I think I had about 30 or 40 that I had to winnow down, but they're the way that I sent them to you were pretty much in chronological order.
Mm-hmm.
But I picked The Who because for me, they're a standout of the British invasion, especially when it comes to the kind of music that I'm fond of. And just for the purposes, I've already disowned power pop earlier in this conversation. So for the purposes of a quick conversation, let's just call it power pop. Pete Townsend of The Who coined the term power pop, trying to describe Pictures of Lily.
Oh,
This is the song that gave us the term power pop. And I have it up here on my computer, so I'll read it to you really quick. This was his quote. Power pop is what we play, what the Small Faces used to play, and the kind of pop the Beach Boys played in the days of fun, 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 which I preferred. So that's how we get the term power pop, from Pete Townsend.
Uncle Pete.
Now so that ties to like my sort of broader musical tastes and probably what people would associate me with the most. But I also love Pictures of Lily. I love the song for a lot of reasons, as it relates to power pop and just as it relates to being a really great hooky, high energy rock song. So unlike a lot of people I know who love music, it wasn't like the Beatles and the British Invasion for me first. As I mentioned, it starts with like hard rock and heavy metal, and then I have to work my way backwards. So while my brothers are feeding me all this really glorious hard rock and heavy metal, my best friend who lived right next door, his mom kept all her records from the 60s.
Oh.
So when I started showing an interest in music, or when Jim and I both started showing an interest in music, she would start whipping records out and give them to me. And one of the ones I got handed was Meaty Beaty Big and Bouncy by The Who.
Which is one of the best album names ever.
Yeah, I mean, it's a compilation, right?
Yeah.
It's a collection of their early singles, and that's the Who that I love the most, is that early sort of mod Who, right? But Pictures of Lily and Can't Explain were the two songs that just like blew my mind. And again, when you ask me about why was I always attracted to drummers, Keith Moon and his drumming on this song, Pictures of Lily, is incredible. Pete Townsend's guitar playing, if you really focus in on it, is in some of the most incredible rock guitar playing, even early on in a song like Pictures of Lily. But then Pictures of Lily also does this really interesting thing where they have the French horn that comes in the middle of the song, that seemingly for no reason. And I kind of love how that hints at the pomposity of what the Who will become later on. And I think, look, in the power pop realm, in the pop rock realm, there's no shortage of songs with girls' names in the title. I think that plays here. And I think it's just ultimately very funny. And I don't think it gets called out enough that, like, on some level, this is a song about a dad introducing his tween son to masturbation.
Yep. Yep.
Which can't be overlooked, although they do a really good job of couching it in nostalgia. And nostalgia is the gasoline the power pop run song.
Oh, that is a great pull quote right there. That's great.
But no, Pictures of Lily, like, I play that for people sometimes, and I'm like, really, I know that you probably think you know this song, but really listen to it. Like, get in there and listen to what John Entwistle's playing on the bass. Really consider what Pete Townsend's doing on the guitar. Really listen to Keith Moon. Like, really, really listen to Keith Moon. It's a fantastic song. I not that it needs to be defended. I don't know anybody who doesn't like Pictures of Lily, but yeah. I think when I think about the kind of song that is core to my musical tastes, that's kind of right in my wheelhouse.
And I got to say, it's nice to see as we go down your list, folks, you'll soon discover there are no Beatles tracks.
I have such a tortured relationship with the Beatles. I really do. Beatles fans angered me so much when I was an angry teenage punk rock kid. Like, at every turn, they just felt like they were like trying to ruin my good time. You'd be like, oh man, I really like this song by Generation X. Well, it's not the Beatles. Dude, I'm 16 years old. Give me a break. And it quite honestly ruined the Beatles for me, which is a bummer for me because I missed out on what is obviously tremendous music until I'm in my 40s. I held a grudge against older Beatles fans.
Wow.
But on top of that, man, does anybody really need to talk about the Beatles anymore? I don't know.
I don't particularly think so. I mean, I like them. They're fine, but I'm not.
They're amazing. They're the freaking Beatles. But
Exactly.
like, okay, we've been talking about them for 50 years or 60 years.
For
60
sure.
years. Yeah.
One band we have not been talking about as long is Big Star,
Yes.
which is the next song. September Girls, spelled Gurls.
This might be my very favorite song of all time.
September girls, they so much. I was your butch, and you were touch. I loved you, well, never mind. I've been crying all the time. 'Cause some boys got it bad. 'Cause some boys got it bad. September girls, I don't know why. How can I deny what's inside? Even though I'll keep away, maybe we'll love all our days. The Sunday boys got it bad.
There is something about just the opening Mando guitar chords
Mm.
and the way that the band comes in that to this day, after thousands of listens, this song still just crushes me. I don't know what it is. I've written about it so much, and I think ultimately I'm trying to figure out why it has me in its grasp, like that, why I've been in its trance for decades now. And it's just pure magic. I can listen to it over and over still. And I just think it's a perfect example of my sweet spot when it comes to pop rock songwriting.
Next up, The Namesake, Remember the Lightning by the band 2020.
These first three songs, I'm kind of building the foundation of where I am today. I don't think in real time. I didn't really start paying attention to the phrase power pop or understanding that there was a world of music that kind of fit under this specific umbrella, probably till the 90s, until some of the music I was playing started getting described that way. Did I really start paying attention to it?
Once with this girl and I wanted so bad. Closing my eyes and I thought I was going mad. Remember the night and it felt so exciting. Remember the lightning. Remember the lightning. Picked up the phone and I wanted to call her. I told her my friends that I can't live without her. Remember the night and it felt so exciting. Remember the lightning. Remember the lightning.
These first three songs, I'm making a pretty solid foundation for my power pop leanings. Remember the Lightning, as I mentioned earlier, is a track by 2020 from their debut album, self-titled debut album. I think it came out in 79. And they were part of this wave of LA power pop bands that are pretty legendary at this point. This is the same era that gives you the Nerves into the Beat, into the Plimsolls, right? The Knack comes out of that same exact scene. There's just a lot of really tremendous bands that come out of LA in that world. But I specifically picked it, one, because obviously I have a newsletter called that, but also because I really like where it sits in sort of the canon of power pop. This is power pop sort of after punk has been infused into the equation a little bit.
Okay.
So it's got a little bit more up-tempo vibe to it.
Now, this next song, it defined a certain period of my life. I mean, I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, and I remember going to see Fast Times at Ridgemont High in the movie theater, in the mall movie theater, naturally. And this song was the first song. And I'm like, what is this? This is so unusual.
Very clear memory of jumping up and down at my friend Anthony's mom's apartment because Anthony was the only person I knew who owned this record. I had been listening to it on the radio. Like when I was at home, music was dominated by my brothers. And so it was a lot of Kiss and Cheap Trick and UFO and Scorpions and all that kind of stuff. But when I was in the car with my dad, he would let me play the radio and I would play pop songs. I would play like pop radio, top 40 radio. And I remember when We Got the Beat came out, I was transfixed by it right away. So to have a friend who owned the record, we would just like spaz out after school. I would go there and, you know, his mom would be at work. And so like we had 2 hours of just like jumping around to the Go-Go's time. And that might've lasted for like 2 weeks, but in my memory, it was like a year of us listening to the Go-Go's because we were little kids. But what I also like about it is this, I didn't put it together till much later, but this kind of starts to lay the foundation for me discovering my own tastes in music. I mean, I was, again, very lucky that I had these older brothers who introduced me to all this great music. And they were so cool to drag a stupid 12-year-old kid along to go like tailgate in the parking lot before a Def Leppard concert with their stoner friends, right? Like it was very, very cool of them to take me along. And I was very lucky. But I needed to find my own musical tastes and kind of discover myself in music. And I think We Got the Beat lays the foundation for that for me. I didn't know it at the time, but they came out of the punk scene, the first wave punk scene in LA. I knew them as this polished pop band, but 18 months before that, they didn't know how to play their instruments and they're playing at all the famous punk clubs with the Germs, you know? And when I 2 years beyond this is when I start to discover X and the Germs and the Gun Club and all these bands that are like so important to me now. But I feel like We Got the Beat helped me turn that corner and started laying the groundwork for me, giving myself permission to sort of like have my own musical tastes outside those that were given to me by my older brothers. So I give this song a lot of credit. Also, as a drummer, Gina Schock on this song is incredible. To this day, it is such a fun song to play. Like if I'm in the rehearsal studio and the guitar player steps out for a cigarette or somebody goes to the bathroom, I'll probably play a few bars of We Got the Beat just because it's so much fun to play.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And then Suburban Home, the Descendants, out of all their songs, why did you select Suburban Home is one of my favorite songs, but why did you select that particular one?
I'm like 12 or 13 and I'm visiting my friend's house, like, you know, a mile from my house. I rode my bike over to see somebody, and there's some neighborhood kids that I didn't know who lived by them. And they are like deep in the British punk thing, mohawks and, you know, zippered pants and safety pins. And they're like in their later teens. And they looked at all this younger, really super young kids. And I think they wanted to kind of scare us. And so they brought us into the apartment, like, you want to listen to some music? And I'm like, yeah, I like music. You know, I'm kind of hoping they play like, you know, Still Rock and Roll to Me by like Billy Joel or something. and they played In God We Trust Incorporated by Dead Kennedys. And mission accomplished. It scared the shit out of me. But that actually is when I start to go like, oh, I want to play punk rock drums. D.H. Pellegro's, like that turned me on. Like I want to be in a punk band, right? Suburban Home is, I think, one of the best hardcore punk songs of all time.
I want to be stereotyped. I want to be classified. I want to be stereotyped. I want to be classified. I want to be alone. I want to suburban home, suburban home, suburban home, suburban home. I want to be masochistic. I want to be sadistic. I want to be alone. I want to suburban home, suburban home, suburban home, suburban home. I don't want no hippie man. I want a house just like mom and dad. I want to be stereotyped. I want to be.
These guys went to my high school, right? Like they went to the same high school I did a few years before me. So I kind of didn't just relate to them on the level of like, they are obviously a great band and this is obviously a legendary song. It's like a legendary song from the moment you first hear it. Whether you have any context or not, you just know that this is a legendary punk song. It's that perfect. But then I have this layer of like, I can relate to these guys because I think the read on the lyrics could be sarcastic.
Yeah.
Meaning I'm singing about all the square people that I grew up with or at my high school who want to, the young Republican types who want to go to school and live the same life as their parents and never have any adventure and work for the man, right? And that is a totally fair read on it. And it seems sarcastic. And it's such a great tone to strike the kind of sarcasm it is.
Mm.
But I think there's another read that is, when you really know who the Descendants are, that I think it's them kind of, or Milo kind of coming to terms with that part of himself that wants that comfort. And he's feeling a little dissonance. That's how I always kind of read it.
Yep.
And I understood that because I grew up in the same neighborhoods as this guy. You can rail against the comfort and the money and the opulence that we were faced with in Manhattan Beach at the time. Again, I lived in North Redondo, which was sort of other side of the tracks, but I went to school in Manhattan Beach. There was a lot of money and you can rail against that, but it also looks pretty appealing.
Yeah.
Comfort looks pretty nice, right? They had been given a pretty good life. And so I always kind of took it as like, this was an internal struggle. That's the way that I perceive it. And what I think the key, whether I'm right or wrong about that, it's just my read on the lyrics. But the key for me is that the sarcastic read, the punk rock sneering, snarling read falls apart when he says, I don't want no hippie pad.
Yeah.
I want a home just like mom and dad. He's in a way railing against punk rock itself. So I don't know. This is a song again that I can put on. There are certain punk songs that I can put on and never tire of, right? Yeah. Like this one's one of them. Nervous Breakdown by Black Flag's one of them. I Hate My School by Red Cross is another one of them. Waiting Room by Fugazi. Like there's certain songs that I can go back to over and over again. But for me in this list, Suburban Home is me fully realizing my own musical tastes and going hard in that direction at a moment when I decided I wanted to play music myself. I had my own musical tastes that were separate from my brother's. I was turning my back to some degree. I never totally turned my back on other forms of music, but I was diving into punk rock. And when I think about that, this is the song that I always think about.
I got the same read from it. I never picked up the sense of irony. I thought it wasn't a longing. It was just like, oh, wow, he really wants this. There was an earnestness to it.
Yeah. And I think he almost felt bad for wanting it, or like felt conflicted about wanting it.
Which, yes, very, very much so. And the next band, full of contradictions, full of irony.
Yeah.
Customer by the Replacements.
Hey, Troy.
Okay, I'm in love with the girl that wants to stop another man. I'm a customer. change. Where are the Twinkies? What's on sale? I'm a customer. I'm a customer. I'm a customer. I'm a customer. I love you.
Again, I mean, this is another one of those punk songs. I don't think that the Replacement's first record, Sorry Ma Forgot to Take Out the Trash, again, 1981, right? So it's the same year as Suburban Home, gets enough credit for what an incredible, truly punk rock record it is.
Yeah.
It is so snotty.
Yes, it is.
But at the same time, so smart.
Yeah.
And for me, and you know, I'm like you, I followed the Replacements all the way through. And I probably came in Let It Be. That's probably about where I came in.
Same.
But when I went back and discovered Sorry Ma, I was like, oh, that's the band, right? Like that's I can see it. I can see where they're gonna go from there.
Yeah.
And for me, the song Customer has it all. I think their entire career is contained in this song. They tell you everything about them. Paul is an incredible songwriter, right? But he's self-effacing and self-destructive, right? Because in this world where he's in love with this girl, he's just a customer. He's a freaking nobody. He's an incredible storyteller, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And the band, even though they like to play off that they're sloppy hacks, right? And they could be, they'd get drunk and do those shows where they were sloppy hacks. If you really spend time with what the band is doing on this song, they're playing their asses off. And Bob Stinson's guitar solo in Customer, if you listen to nothing else in this song, listen to Bob Stinson's guitar solo. It is one of the most unhinged displays of guitar genius you will ever listen to. And no one thinks of the song that way. But for me, and I know this is just my personal thing, Customer is the kernel from which all other Replacements grow for the rest of their career. I think it's all there.
I would be inclined to agree with you, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Such a great song. I was lucky enough to meet them a couple of times in the later 80s. And I remember at one point, right before they were going on, someone said maybe Paul even just said, like, what should we play? Like offhandedly. Like they didn't have a set list. And I was like, Customer. And he was like, you're going to have to play that one, man. That's way too fast for any of us. You know, it's just like, there was never a chance they were going to play Customer ever again. But man, I'm so happy that I got to make that request to him in the 5 minutes I was around him.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And then we get into Weezer, Say It Ain't So, from the Blue Album.
Oh yeah. Alright. Somebody's hiding, it's drowning my icebox. Somebody's cold one is giving me chills. Guess I'll just close my eyes. Oh yeah, alright, feels good inside. Flip on the telly, So life take off.
So big leap here, right? Like, again, this is where it got really tortured because I had to jump over a lot of bands. I had to basically jump over the entire rest of the 80s. And there were so many versions of this list. Like, looking at it now still breaks my heart the Teenage Fan Club's not on here. But for whatever reason, and I sent you my list and I said, if I don't send this to you, I am never going to stop tweaking it. And then I literally sent you an edited version 3 minutes later.
Yep.
And I promised in that second version that I would not change it again. And the only way I was able to stick by that was not looking at it again until 10 minutes before we spoke. So I looked at this and I was like, wait, this isn't, in my head, there was a different version. So I was like, where are all these songs? So Teenage Fan Club's not on there. I can't believe it. Like, I'm looking at this now and 17-year-old me has like folded arms and is shaking his head because, oh my God, Closer to the Stars by Soul Asylum's not on here. How is that possible? That's like one of your 5 favorite songs of all time. How is it possible that's not on this list? But I had to make some tough choices, Keith. So
I understand.
Jump ahead from Customer to Say It Ain't So. And Say It Ain't So's on here for a couple reasons. One, Generation Blue, right?
Yeah.
This is something that's been really top of mind to me because I've been doing a lot of podcasts and I've been writing a lot of guest blog posts in addition to the 2 years I spent putting that project together. And Weezer comes up a lot. It is also the 30th anniversary of the Blue album this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very, very, very fortunate to have been invited to the kickoff to the 30th anniversary celebration where Weezer played the entire album in order. Well, they were supposed to, but they messed up and they got a couple songs mixed up. But they were supposed to play the whole album in order at a small club in LA in March. 500 people.
Fantastic.
And so I'm standing there that night with one of my oldest friends, Marco, who got me into Ride All High. And just for clarity, he was on the list. I was his +1. Okay. I don't have any magic powers in this regard. Marco just takes me cool places. The whole show was amazing. Looking around and seeing all these old friends was amazing. Watching everybody, just pure joy on their faces during this, being able to be in this packed 500 person club. People my age with their grown kids singing the songs back at them. Oh. So Say It Ain't So comes up and they bring out a young artist who's, I don't know anything about this artist. I think his name is Dominic Fike. And he traded some of the vocals with Rivers, but the whole room was screaming the lyrics to this song back at Weezer. Man. It was just one of those moments. And it just reminded me this song is an all-timer. And the way that I use this song in my day-to-day life is if I run into somebody who says they don't like Weezer, I play them Say It Ain't So, or I ask them to listen to Say It Ain't So. And if they still say that they don't like Weezer, they honestly can look me in the face and after listening to how great this song is and say that they don't get it, or they don't think the Blue album's all it's cracked up to be, then I know that we don't really have a lot in common musically. It's a litmus test for me.
I feel that way about the Replacements.
So, okay. So you and I have like danced around the Replacements. What's your Replacements era? Are you like a Tim? I would guess you to be a Tim guy. No,
although I will say I do like the new Tim. I think Tim is a great record. I think the songs are all great. I really hate the production of that record. It sounds like it was recorded in a Budweiser can, which normally doesn't bother me. I like the high ends like that, but that just didn't work for me at all. So my go-to is Pleased to Meet Me.
Great. The Memphis record. They recorded that at Ardent, which was the studio where Big Star recorded all their records.
Yeah. Yeah. That is the creme de la creme. I don't hate Don't Tell a Soul. I think it gets a bum rap. They're a band. They took a stab at it in their own Replacements way. And it didn't work out. All Shook Down is a Replacements album in name only. So.
I would agree with you. That was a Paul Westerberg solo record. I mean, and Bob Mayer's book kind of makes that totally clear. Yeah. No, Pleased to Meet Me is genius. Mm-hmm. That's probably the era where I saw them live the most.
And Let It Be is an incredible record. I think it shows their just the range the band has. The first time I heard Androgynous, it was so out of left field for me. I didn't even know what the word meant. One, and based on everything else on the record, it just came out. I'm like, I don't understand. It was hard for me to process, to go from, Kiss to punk to Gary's Got a Boner to Androgynous. The range of the lyrics are so amazing. And growing up in Minnesota, if you go back to what is it? It's the one with Color Me Impressed on it.
That's not Let It Be?
No. It's the one before that. Hootenanny. Mm-hmm. There's a song on Hootenanny called Buck Hill.
Yes.
Which is a ski area in Minneapolis.
That's an instrumental, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Except when they yell Buck Hill. Buck Hill! But yeah, that is my take on the Replacements. For me, the Replacements are Pleased to Meet Me.
I mean, they were definitely at the top of their game. I mean, that might be the pinnacle.
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Which is not to take anything away from any of the others. Being a guy on with your foot in the door there, foot in the ground. Not foot in the ground. Jesus Christ.
I have a foot in the ground right now as we speak.
When are they going to release the Let It Be box set?
I don't know. I got to imagine they're going to. And I mean, I have so much respect for Bob Mayer. I mean, that book, Trouble Boys, what an undertaking. And he just knocked it out of the park, because knowing what troublemakers those guys are, like, it could have gone any number of ways. They could have just lied to him for like a year, just because they think it's funny that like he had all this wrong information. But they seemed to really open up to him, and he handled their totally chaotic history with such a level head and such care, like the care of a fan.
Oh yeah,
their story. That book is really nuts. So I'm just thrilled that Bob Mayer's involved with all of these issues and is writing all the liner notes and is helping produce them. And I think he's won some Grammys for it, right? Like,
I think so.
Or for something. I got to imagine that behind the scenes, he's pushing for that one, for that box set.
Everyone wants it. It's the definitive Replacements record.
Yeah.
And just the chutzpah to name the album after a Beatles record.
But to hear them tell it, it was like, yes, they had the chutzpah, but the decision took all of 30 seconds. Yeah. It's just who those guys were. They were just like professionally flying by the seat of their pants.
Yes. Chaos.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Now, going into the next track, this is a band that I don't know how I feel about this band. Guided by Voices. I'm from Dayton, Ohio, and they're a big Dayton band, but I don't know what it is. I never got them.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're spoiled for choice when it comes to like really great rock bands who put out either amazing songs or albums or had really tremendous careers. So like you spark on the stuff you spark on.
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly. Yeah.
When I got back,
but hold on, I feel a little guilty sometimes when people are like, you gotta like Guided by Voices.
No, you don't gotta.
No, I don't.
And I'm the guy who just said that I'll make you listen to Say It Ain't So, and then I'll judge you in totality.
Chance of a lifetime, you can be anyone they
this song represents we were talking earlier about these moments that I try to be recognized and try to be thankful for, that I've been lucky enough to have in my life, or these junctures or these pivotal times in my life. This song captures a pretty crazy year or two in my life. So I moved back from Prague. I'm living in Hermosa Beach. I'm the arts editor for the free weekly paper in Manhattan Beach. I'm playing in those two bands, the Fish Sticks and Bookmobile that I told you about. And I'm pining away for this girl who is the girlfriend of a friend of mine, quietly pining away. And look, we were young. I don't make any excuses. I can't, the heart wants what the heart wants. Was it the coolest thing to do ever? No, it wasn't. But eventually they break up. I make my feelings known. And we ended up together.
Oh.
And that woman is my wife, and she's inside the house right now. And we've been together since. So I have a very emotional attachment to this song, because it was sort of our song, because no sooner did we get together than she moved to Northern California to finish her college degree. And so the idea of motoring away takes on a certain significance. But one of the bands I was in at the time used to cover this song occasionally. And I have this very specific memory of playing this song to a packed backyard of very drunk people on 4th of July, which is a big deal by the beach in Southern California. And basically leaving my body. Like it was such a transcendent moment covering this song. And so I have that memory tied up in it. And then the last thing I'll say is we got really into this record and found out they were playing the Troubadour on this tour, the guided by on the Alien Lanes tour. And we wanted to get tickets, and we weren't sure if it was sold out or not. And I think at the time it was like Ticketron was the name.
Yeah, yes.
But you had to call. You had to call them if you didn't go to like Music Plus and buy them at the Ticketron desk or whatever.
Yep.
So day of show, we called, and I tried to buy 5 tickets, which was how many people were in our party. And they said there are 3 tickets left for the entire show. So I bought the 3 tickets, and then we had to draw straws, and 3 of us went and 2 of us did not go. And it was, to this day, one of the best shows I've ever seen in my life. Like, Guided by Voices is an absolute tour de force of songwriting and live rock and roll to my tastes. But witnessing Bob Pollard in his prime, like the Scarecrow from the Wizard of Oz out there, high kicking with a cooler full of beer at his feet, playing all these songs that I think are genius because I love Alien Lanes. I don't know, man. I've just got a lot of like personal memories and emotional attachment to this song, and it will forever be one of my favorite songs of all time. But I mean, isn't that it? Isn't that what rock and roll fandom is all about? Is attaching your entire being to certain songs for like really no good reason?
100%.
Part of you.
Yeah.
This is one for me.
That's awesome. It's a great story too.
Thank you.
Shaken All Over by the Whiffs. I
couldn't live in the past for the entire list, right? So like, if any band that is currently recording and playing encapsulates my musical tastes, it is the Whiffs out of Kansas City. I love this band. I love everything they stand for. I love everything that they are trying to do. I love how scrappy they are. Like they're still a old-fashioned indie get in the van rock band who happens to also write impossibly hooky songs. Like impossibly hooky. So when I discovered these guys, I didn't discover them on their first album or EP. I discovered them on their second, which is called Another Whiff. And Shakin' All Over is the first song on the album, and it is an unbelievable album opener, according to my tastes. But it's, I mean, there are other songs on the record like Hey Little Ann, and of course they have a song called She, because if you're a pop rock band worth your salt, you have a song called She. And I got to see them play in LA, and they did not disappoint. They aren't afraid to be sloppy and rock and roll and loud and unpredictable and just beautiful up on stage. And so I knew I had to include them on this list, because if any band's doing it right now, that's doing it for me personally, it's got to be these guys.
That's great to hear. It's great to hear bands still want to get in a van and do it.
They're in Europe right now.
Sweet.
Yeah, they're just, they record and they tour. And I think, you know, another thing is I kind of like, because I've interviewed them a few times. I interviewed them for Big Takeover, and then I've interviewed them for Remember the Lightning. And so we've gotten to talk a few times. The lead singer, Rory Cameron, kind of, well, one of the lead singers, it's Rory and Zach are the two guys that sing up at the mic. Zach's a bass player. And I kind of heard their story, and is like, he was saying that they basically like played hardcore punk shows coming up, but that, you know, kind of always had basically my story, which is they were into this high energy, hard, angry music, but they always had an ear for pop. And so I think there might be some like subterranean level on which I connect with them, where I'm hearing sort of similar tastes or similar backgrounds. But Rory said one of the funniest things ever to me. And I think that this is a really good encapsulation or a soundbite about the sound of their music. I asked him in an interview for Big Takeover, how do you explain your music to people? And he said something, I'm paraphrasing. He said, I just tell my friends' dads that we're like a punked up Beatles. Dads love us. That was his quote. And it's absolutely accurate. They're like the Beatles meet the Ramones meet the Replacements. That's that's how I kind of describe their sound. But
dads love us. Dads love us.
I mean, he's not wrong. It is dad rock to a degree, right? But it's steeped in the Ramones and steeped in early Replacements and steeped in like, they have obviously the Beatles, but they have such, you can tell that they have studied this music, that they are fans of this music, that they have lived this music. They're not putting on outfits and buying Rickenbackers. These guys are a rock and roll band, and they know how to write a hook.
Few and far between these days.
There's a lot more than you'd think.
Probably.
Yeah.
Last band, number 10, The Beths, expert in a dying field.
Are you a fan of the Beths?
I don't know them, to be perfectly honest.
So they're from New Zealand. They're like probably as close to indie rock royalty as you're going to find these days. It's not some like hidden gem band. They're like constantly on the road. Everybody who listens to them, who has certain tastes in music, instantly recognizes their genius. Like, it's no secret. I'm not letting you in on anything. Everybody loves the Beths, right? Okay. But to me, they represent the future of the music I like. They're a band that's, again, incredibly talented musically. Liz Stokes is it's I want to say an incredible songwriter, but I almost feel like it doesn't do her justice. Like, she's world class. Her songwriting is world class, and she's got the band behind her to bring that to life. They're all like crazy talented.
Can we erase our history? Is it as easy as this? Plausible deniability. I swear I've never heard of it. And I can go. You can't let go, you can't stop, can't rewind. Love is learned over time, till you're an expert at a dying field.
I was very lucky to see them at that same small club where I got to see Weezer. It's called the Lauden, really great venue in LA. And this was in the middle of them opening for Death Cab for Cutie at the Hollywood Bowl, doing a run of shows there. But in the middle of that, they played a one-off underplay by themselves.
Wow.
At the 2 shows, I think. And so I got to see one of those. And I honestly didn't know what to expect. I loved this album, Expert in a Dying Field, so much that I was like, there's no way that it can be that good live. There's just not any way it could be that good live. It was better.
Wow.
Like, I was, as much as I love that record, they're such a great live band, all so individually talented, and they make it seem effortless, but like the whole band can sing really amazing backing vocals and harmonies. The guitar player is a shredder, although you would never really know it, but then you start to watch and you're like, okay, that guy really knows what he's doing up there. She's unassuming to a degree, but you kind of can't take your eyes off of her as a front person. Drummer chops for days. Bass player's like effortlessly playing his runs and his lines, but he's also like hilarious on the mic. They were just like a full package live band. But I picked this one for all the reasons I just said, but because in looking at this list, I think it also sums up sort of where I'm at with music and writing about music and talking about music, because this song is about, if you listen to the lyrics or read the lyrics, it's about the residue of a failed relationship, which, think about how poetic that is. I'm an expert in our relationship that fell apart. That's what she's saying. I have all this personal knowledge of this thing that no longer exists. That's the poetry of the lyric. But I interpret it, and then the video kind of bears this out, because the video is a little more literal. It's like the band recording in a house, in different rooms of the house. But as the camera goes through the house, you see like an old camera collection. And like, so it's all these forms of media that are dying out. I experienced this song, Expert in a Dying Field, as guys like you and me who have all this deep, lifelong knowledge and love and respect for rock and roll. And what that allows us to do is talk to each other on microphones about rock and roll.
Exactly.
Right? Or write about it.
Yeah.
So again, it's me imbuing a song with some personal attachment and feelings and ideas. But if you just listen to it on the surface, incredible band. If there's one band on this list that I recommend you spend some time with, Keith, it is the Beths, because I think what they are doing gives me more hope for the future of this music that we love, this genre, than almost any other band that I can listen to these days.
That is a ringing endorsement.
One man's opinion, but I do love them.
All right. It's duly noted. I trust your judgment for sure. Well,
You're going to cut this down to like 5 minutes, right?
Yeah. These are ones I do very little editing on.
I bet.
They're just for fun.
All good.
Yeah. Steve, thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad we got through it. I had no idea. I didn't know what to expect, but that was a lot of fun. I hope I didn't bore you.
Not at all. Not at all. I appreciate everything. And I love talking with you. So it's always a treat. And again, my heartfelt thanks for keeping this abandoned albums thing on the rails in the early stages. And I mean that sincerely.
Dude, I love the show. I love the concept. I think you do a great job of interviewing people and getting out of the way. You bring passion to it. You bring knowledge to it, but you're not dominating the conversation. So when I recommend people to you, it's usually people I know or have some connection to. And I say to them before I make the introduction, I think you will really enjoy talking to Keith. And they say, great, introduce me. And I mean that. And I wouldn't make those introductions if I didn't think they would enjoy talking to you. So it's my pleasure to connect you guys. And I will continue doing it. I'll probably run into somebody next week who's looking to get on a podcast, and you'll get an email from me.
That's awesome. And I have borrowed your phrase, cool people should know cool people.
They should.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way, that network effect is the way that things happen, right? You've got to create these creative collisions, but it takes effort. They don't just happen automatically, especially as you get older. That's the other thing. They happened a lot when I was younger, or I just wasn't aware enough to recognize whatever role I did or didn't play in them. As I've gotten older and seen how easy it is to ignore your creative impulses because of your responsibilities or because you're tired or whatever, because you've got hangups about, old people shouldn't do this. Like all the things we go through doing this as a middle-aged person. Once you decide to commit the way that we have with our podcasts and our writing and our books and all the things that we do, I feel that is part of your responsibility to foster those connections between other people.
100%. I agree 100%.
And it works for me too. People recommend me for things as well.
Well, as always, this was a treat.
Awesome.
I will let you go. I will let you go. It's late for me.
It's late for me too. It's 7:30.
Not that old, man.
Hey, speak for yourself. I got no shame. I'll go to bed at 8:15 if the mood strikes.
And I'm going to go ahead and hit end.
Mix and Match was written and produced by Keith R. Higgins. It was recorded at Thunder Love Studio, where it was engineered by Tony Jackson and mixed by Diane Coughlin. Thanks for listening.